This ESPN podcast is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects. The BS Report. The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, taping this on a Monday here in Southern California. My Comrex, something weird happened. I'm on the phone. Chuck Klosterman is on Skype. I have very few rules with the BS Report, but whenever I get a text from Chuck at like 1 o'clock East Coast time in the morning saying, I want to do a podcast, we queue up the podcast machine. We do a podcast. Chuck, how are you?
Good. How are you doing there, William?
There's a lot of stuff that you're excited about right now. Excited to discuss. Things are happening.
I felt like there were two very interesting stories kind of happening on the same day. One particularly interesting and the other just sort of intriguing in the way stories are often kind of intriguing.
Well, let's talk about Michael Sam first, because I think you and I have even discussed this on a podcast. I remember predicting it heading into 2012. That would be the year that we had an openly gay athlete. It happened with Jason Collins, but as it turned out,
this is
Collins,
much different to me.
Yeah. Jason Collins was. We thought maybe Jason Collins had a year left. As it turns out, there's been some questions about why he didn't join a team this year, and people wondering what the reasons were. And the reality is, in the NBA, 75 to 80 guys leave every year and are replaced by 75 to 80 new guys, and he was hanging on that last year. I think there were real reasons why he didn't find another team.
Yeah, there's really only a handful of NBA teams you could even make an argument that they need like a big guy kind of at the end of the bench for all the things he would have provided. But assuming that Sam is a real edge rusher, virtually any team can use him if he has talent. So it does kind of forces every team in the league to sort of think about this issue. Right.
Captain of Missouri, voted team's most valuable player. 6'2", 260. So it doesn't seem, a little undersized, but doesn't seem too undersized. And made the fascinating decision to come out before the draft. And actually, as he said, it turned out that he had really seriously considered coming out before the final season, which, let's start with that decision first, not to come out before the end of the season. He came out to his teammates, did not come out, publicly. What do you think that college football season would have been like if he had come out last August?
That's interesting. He would have been certainly among the most famous players in the country. That's one of the biggest shifts here. It's like this guy who I would guess a lot of people who follow college football had barely heard of. I mean, now he will be probably the second most watched guy at the combine, after Manziel. How would the season have been different? Particularly the fact that Missouri was so good this year. I think that it would have sort of been everywhere. His play would have really been under a microscope. It is interesting, too, to me that, even before this came out, although there is seemingly this growing sense that this was kind of an open secret among people who were on the inside, certainly, that's what the stories seem to suggest. He was co-player of the year in the SEC on defense.
Yep.
The guy he was co-player with was a guy from Alabama, like A.J. Mosley, who's probably going to go 12th or 13th or something overall. Clowney, who everyone thought would be the player of the year in the SEC, will go first or second. It is interesting to me that even taking, before this revelation, he was projected as like a third or fourth round pick. You would think, the second or third best defensive player in by far the best conference would be among the 50 best available guys, but there doesn't seem to be that kind of consensus. So there's that issue immediately. It's like, this is really going to make it extra complicated. It would be different if he was like a irrefutable talent that everyone said was like a top 10 pick. So, one thing I wanted to talk about is, I thought it was interesting last night when this was happening, how angry people were at Sports Illustrated for running the story where a lot of anonymous GMs were sort of questioning how this would impact his draft stock and whatnot. I thought that was a strange reaction because, would they have preferred that Sports Illustrated make these guys go on the record so that they would lie? and just claim that maybe he didn't have enough talent. I mean, at least now we know if he slips deep in the draft, it's from the idea that there's a degree, maybe a heavy degree of homophobia among management and maybe coaching staffs. I don't think his teammates or prospective teammates will care at all. I mean, and I think the way Missouri reacted to this is a great example of this. I mean, the majority of guys in the NFL are under the age of 30, and you just don't see much open, aggressive discomfort with gay people among younger people anymore. That era has just kind of passed. If anything, I think there might be some issue with the high number of really born-again Christians in the NFL, of which there is a great deal, who might sort of say things in the media, not about sort of, just about, the idea of homosexuality that might kind of make things uncomfortable. But I don't think his teammates will have an issue with it. I mean, what do you think?
You just gave me a lot to work with. Well, first of all, let's talk about how you were surprised by the reaction. I don't think it's fair to sample social media reaction as the actual reaction, because
that's true. Yeah.
I think social media has and this is why I've been trying to phase out of Twitter a little bit. Social media has a tendency to just play up the extremes one way or the other. Mm-hmm. So, and say you have 140 characters and you got to be as loud as possible. And I think, people look at that SI thing. How could they do that? And then there's exclamation points and they try to get a little snowball going. Hey, listen, if the whole point of this is that his sexual preference shouldn't matter, which it shouldn't, then he should be discussed like he's a prospect, because he is a prospect. And the reality is the fact that he did this before the draft makes this the single most interesting story in the draft, because let's say he never came out. So now he gets drafted, I'm going to say, 4th round by the Patriots.
Okay.
Seems like a typical Bill Belichick draft pick, right?
Sure.
Overachiever, came from a good program.
Could play multiple positions, theoretically.
Multiple positions, great character guy, the kind of guy the Pats take and they just kind of figure it out later and figure out where he fits in, winning program, all that stuff. So now, but the reality is you're looking 4th, 5th round for that. So now, if he falls, once he falls past, say, the 3rd round, every team that passes him, I feel like it's going to be, almost a story. And I'm not sure that's totally fair, because I think these teams are just looking at the draft like, who is the best player? Who helps us the most? What do we need? Who has the talent? Who can we coach? Things like that. I don't think the sexual preference is going to come into play. I mean, you could argue that teams wouldn't want the circus, quote unquote, but that didn't stop San Diego from taking Monte Teo. He went in the 2nd round.
I totally agree. I do think it probably is a good circus. I think the city he goes to will matter a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But, I think that there's certain coaches, like I think Chip Kelly, I think Pete Carroll would be like this, that the idea that they, in a small way, might actually be more interested in him, in a sense, in that sense that they might think, well, this is a guy who maybe we can get as a steal in the 4th round, who's really a 3rd round value if other people are afraid of him. The weird thing is, though, it's like when they start talking about a guy's draft stock dropping, it really becomes like a self-perpetuating thing, because if there's talk of a guy's stock dropping, teams then think, well, if it comes down to him and a similar player in the 5th round, but if we think he's going to drop, maybe we can get him later in the 6th round.
Right.
So, I mean, that's one thing I hate whenever they talk about a dude's stock dropping, is that it actually becomes true just by talking about it. So the fact that the consensus seems to be now that that this hurt him a little bit in terms of where he'll get picked, that probably is true, although it will be fascinating if he goes to the combine and runs a really fast 40. I mean, like that would really, because if you take this out of the equation, if you take him being gay out of the equation, if a guy like that shows up at the combine and runs fast, he's the one everyone's talking about as maybe he's a mid-2nd round pick all of a sudden. Now they'll be like, this is a mid-2nd round value if he's fast, but there's all this other stuff which is described as baggage, even though it's not baggage at all. It's just information.
Right. The combine is the first really interesting wrinkle. and it could swing it one way or the other. Like he might bomb at the combine, and then it'll just be a late round pick. It's funny though, hearing that people think that this could hurt his draft status and people would be afraid to take him because of the ensuing circus and all that stuff. I'm going the other way. I think it's more likely that that somebody rolls the dice on him in the fourth round because, first of all, there's not going to be any backlash to the pick. It's 2014. And if there's any backlash whatsoever, just look at what happens to anybody who goes against the grain with this stuff. They become a pariah. Mm-hmm. So nobody's going to say anything. The fans are probably going to embrace them. And, if you're an organization, especially if you're a GM that's either in trouble or, wants to buy some goodwill or something, I would think that person's more likely to take them.
Think if you're the GM from Minnesota, the whole Chris Clowney thing disappears instantly if you select him.
100%.
Another thing that is interesting is, and this is, again, maybe closer to what you're saying of you can't sort of, look at like the fringe of the internet as a reflection of perception. But, there is sort of a growing class of very, politically based sports writers, who are essentially interested in sports only as sort of as a kind of a microcosm of social politics, and like they kind of exist just to be outraged by things. It will be interesting to see what will happen if Michael Sam is drafted by the Washington Redskins. What level of outrage will be greater? It's like
right.
So
the other thing with Michael Sam, and this is, I think, the most crucial point of anything, and I haven't read all the stuff today because I've been working on a bunch of stuff, but just the crucial point for me is it seems like he's the right type of person for this. Because, and we talked about this with Jason Collins too, where, you're just asking a lot from somebody in a lot of different ways. For any abuse that might come down the road from anonymous people, who knows? From the spotlight, the type of person you are, whether you can just roll with whatever, how outgoing you are, how likable you are to teammates, things like that. I feel like if it was going to be some football player coming into the draft and onto a team as a rookie, it would almost have to be a certain type of player. And it seems like he's that player. You know what I mean? Like this guy who was obviously loved at Missouri, and was a leader and things like that. I think that person would have a better chance to succeed than somebody who's just quiet, introvert guy who doesn't like the limelight, who doesn't want to give interviews. It seems like this guy's kind of positioning himself as an ambassador, which I think he has to be in a lot of ways, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's really only been, it's been less than a day now, of course there was going to be a lot of, he had to give an interview, like he gave one to Chris Connolly, I saw, and there I think there's a couple others he gave to like print or web places. I think that's probably true. That factor will not matter as much as if he can play. I mean,
if he's good at football,
that will certainly be the biggest thing. I think that it will likely prompt probably not other NFL players to come out, but I do think it will. I think there'll probably be one or two college players who come out before next season. I would not be surprised at all, particularly when they hear that he talked to his team and there was literally no problem. I mean, and not only was there no problem, there really good secrecy on their part. I mean, did you know about this? I mean,
no.
I didn't. I mean, I feel like I follow this pretty closely. Like I follow the SEC pretty closely, as much as you can living in New York and just sort of going through media. But I had no idea about any of this, and neither did the friends of mine who follow college football the most either. I suppose maybe people who who are really invested in the Missouri program may have heard whispers of this, sort of like Don Amici was it Don Amici?
Yeah.
John Amici. Yeah, Don Amici played in the 50s. Yeah, at Penn State, there were rumors about that while he was there. But I'm really impressed by the rest of that team,
Well, I think, some of this stuff's going to be awkward. Like, it's definitely like talking about it at the draft, I think, is weird, especially when you're talking about fourth and fifth round. You're throwing against the wall. By the end of the second round, everybody that gets picked after that, you have no idea if that guy's going to potentially be a starter or out of the league in a year. There's just no way to know.
Although, certainly in basketball, I feel it's that way after about the 15th pick. Football, They seem like they often get guys in the third, fourth, fifth round who are really significant.
Well, I'm not saying you can't get those guys. Yeah. I'm just saying there's no way to know. I think if you whiff on a second round pick, that's not great. You should at least be able to get somebody who contributes to your team in the second round. But once you get to the third round, there's more of a crapshoot mentality, and people look at it different ways. Like the Patriots tend to shy away from the major high upside guys and either go for guys that they know are going to be productive, or they take wild gambles on somebody who had problems, like Alfonso Denner. The strategy is different for everybody. I think in this case, he does fit the type of those overachieving mid-round guys who end up, or mid-draft guys who end up, all of a sudden it's like, hey, there's Michael Sam. You might remember him from Missouri. He's drafted in the 5th round. He's starting for the Packers right now. And you could kind of see that being the scenario for him. But I look forward to the day when we just don't care about this stuff. It just shouldn't matter.
Oh, sure. I think that's like a very common reaction. But to me, this is a big story. It's a
huge story. I'm just saying, we know that it was going to take baby steps. Collins was a baby step. Robbie Rogers was a baby step. This is a baby step. And I think you take 10 of these steps, and eventually it doesn't even matter. And even when that oral history came out of the Houston Oilers, I think in '93, mm-hmm. and there was that section about how they knew there were gay guys on the team. They treated them like all that stuff, and it felt like that was going to be a big deal, but nobody really cared. And I'm not sure. This people care because this is somebody who's starting his career. It's not like he didn't come out at the end of it or in the middle of it or whatever. This is like his whole career. This is going to be a part of whenever people talk about him. But I think within 5 years, I just don't think. Yeah, seriously, 5 years from now, do you think we're even talking about sexual preference with players?
It's possible. The conversation over this might last as long as the conversation about the black quarterback lasted. Maybe not even that long. That's really was, from the, the beef of the argument, sort of from the early 70s up until maybe the late. It could be 10 years that it's still something people talk about, but maybe not. I guess it is unrelated to the game completely. There's just it has no relationship on how the person performs. It's not like people are questioning whether or not gay guys are strong enough or something. I think that never comes up.
Right.
The
other part is, I just feel like if the homophobia or bigotry, any of the stuff that might have popped out 30 years ago, if anybody tried that stuff now, they would be excoriated. And
yes.
Let's say he gets drafted by, I don't know, the Jaguars. And the second day of camp, some dude on his team does something stupid as a prank, puts a dress in his locker, something idiotic. That guy becomes a pariah.
Yeah.
Can you think of anybody who'd be raked over the coals more than the guy who pulls some sort of prank on Michael Sam in day 2 of camp? There's no way that happens.
The perception of that would be way worse than the perception of what Richie Incognito did.
Yeah.
Because at least with Richie Incognito, there was a certain contingent of people who were like, well, football's a different culture and people talk differently. That would not be an acceptable thing to say about someone doing a homophobic action against a prospective member of your own team. There's just no way that would, that you're right. I don't think this will be an issue with any of his teammates. I think it will be a media issue. I do think it could be some management issue. I think that there are probably some, guys in their 50s and 60s who still view this differently, maybe. But I don't think that any, and just the number of guys of current players who seem to have come out in support of him immediately without prompting, just wanting to be on board with this, I think is a pretty positive thing.
Well, you made the crucial point earlier. He just did a whole season at Missouri when he was out, and his teammates loved him and embraced him. So we have a test case already. It's not like It's not, you can't say, gee, I wonder what's going to happen. We already just saw what's going to happen. I think, it's almost like I said this with the Jason Collins thing too. It's one of those things that feels like a huge deal, and it is in some ways, and in other ways it isn't. I think the cool thing for Michael Sam is, assuming he's up for it, and it seems like he is, he's now positioning himself as, somebody who becomes one of the first people you think of when you think of this stuff. And I think even you look at the way Jason Collins handled himself the last year and the interviews he's done, he's really been, out there all over the place publicly. He's been going to a lot of events, doing a lot of charity work, a lot of interviews, is just really good at kind of advancing that cause. And it seems like this Michael Sam's ready. I like the way he handled this weekend. I thought the timing was right. I thought the interviews he did were good.
Yeah,
and
do you know how, did he contact ESPN and say this is going to happen? We should set something up. I mean, do you know how this worked?
I'm guessing, I don't know all the details, but I'm guessing it was a lot like what happened with Jason Collins, where you have either an agent or probably an agent gets together with a media strategist, and they figure out a way to get this out, what the timing is, who the right people to talk to. It's a whole process, and they probably decided to do 3 interviews at once, and one TV, one print, whatever, and then just try to figure out a way to get it out. We didn't talk about the one possibility. What if he doesn't do great at the combine? What if he doesn't get drafted? I think that would cause the most outrage.
If he doesn't get drafted, is 12 rounds? Is that what it is now in the NFL?
No, it's 7.
7?
7 rounds.
7 rounds. Boy, I guess I'm wrong about this. I thought there was 12 rounds because I thought the draft was 3 days now. The first round Thursday.
No, it's remember Mr. Relevance, the last pick of the 7th round.
Okay. Well, boy. Well, it's possible then that he might not get drafted. I thought it was a 12. Boy, I was just totally wrong about this. Well,
have you ever been more excited for a combine for somebody's 40-yard dash and weight stuff? I can't wait.
I was pretty excited about this combine more so in general anyways, just with the quarterbacks and stuff. So, yes,
right.
So now this might be the best combine of our lifetime. But,
huge combine. Come on, Michael Sam, get the 4.5.
If he doesn't get drafted, I don't think it will be a big deal if immediately upon the completion of the draft, it's but he's already been contacted by 4 teams, and he's going, then it might look like, well, okay, there is interest in this guy. They just were maybe concerned about his football metrics. He wasn't strong enough, wasn't fast enough or whatever, but they're still interested in him as a person. If he doesn't get drafted and no one reaches out to him, then that will be real kind of outrage. But
yeah, your worst case scenario, realistic scenario. Somehow he doesn't get drafted, but then 5 or 6 teams try to sign him immediately after the draft. I don't see there's any conceivable way he's not on a roster in training camp because, the other part is, if you're Goodell, what do? Do you do nothing? Do you kind of casually put some feelers out and make sure teams are considering him? Because you know how he thinks about stuff. He knows he'll take heat if nobody drafts him.
Yeah,
that league has enough image issues already.
That was our suspicion about David Stern with Collins. And, I feel like David Stern was more of that kind of commissioner who might take a guy aside and say, give this guy a tryout. This is important for the league. This is, Goodell seems less like that. Goodell seems more like he just makes these decisions and sort of he wants to be more of a Mount Landis type almost.
I don't know. He's a Manchurian candidate.
Yeah. I don't think he would do that. I
don't think he would either. Speaking of Collins, I got to say, I'm amazed that the Clippers haven't signed him. Especially going to their games. They just signed Hedo Turkoglu, who they have right now. They have Hedo Turkoglu, Antoine Jameson, Ryan Hollins, and Byron Mullins. right? All of those guys are guys that stand 25 feet from the basket. The entire Clippers team is just a team full of guys that stand 25 feet from the basket, except for Blake and DeAndre. If there was a team out there who was a contender who needed somebody who could come in for 10 minutes and guard Dwight Howard, you would pick the Clippers, because they might see the Rockets in round 1, round 2, whatever, and they wouldn't really have anybody to guard Dwight Howard other than DeAndre. Now, on top of this, Doc Rivers coached Jason Collins last year. He said Jason Collins was one of the most extraordinary people he ever coached. Great teammate, loved him, whole thing. And yet he signed Hedo Turkoglu?
I mean, I don't know.
That's bizarre. Maybe Collins doesn't want to play anymore. I got to admit, I don't have all the information. Maybe Collins is checked out and he just wants to move on to the next phase of his life. But if he wanted to play again, I find it impossible to believe that he wouldn't have more use to the Clippers than Antoine Jamison does.
See, I don't know. I guess I disagree with you. Turkoglu especially feels like he would have potential to give you more in the playoffs than Jason Collins would. You're really looking at Collins as a guy, just as a body, just as 6 fouls. I don't know. You probably watched him play more at the end of his career.
I did, because he's in the Celtics.
Yes.
Yeah, he's still a good defensive center. That's all he can do. I mean, you're playing 4-on-5 with him offensively. I just saw Turkoglu in person. I mean, first of all, Antoine Jamison's washed up. Like, he shouldn't be in the league anymore. He doesn't offer anything. Turkoglu came in against Miami the other night. The one play I remember was that he was dribbling and just fell down.
Yeah,
the way like you would, like a 42-year-old guy would in a pickup game. Huh. I don't think he's going to help them either. So it's just weird to me that you're going to roll the dice. Like they brought in Steven Jackson. He was 35 pounds overweight. It was clear from the first minute that he wasn't going to help them this season. The point is, like, they're just kind of throwing stuff against the wall with some of these old guys. It's strange to me that they're going to go into the playoffs without a backup center who can defend. But anyway, let's talk about Marcus Smart.
Yeah, I wanted to get to this. First of all, right up front, I'm just curious with your overall reaction to what happened.
Seems like the guy just called him a piece of crap, right?
Well, that's what the guy is saying. But this
audio seems to confirm.
Yeah. This is what, okay, well, because here's, I guess, the first thing I want. Maybe this is a better way to go at this. How much bearing should what the fans say have on the degree to which we accept the idea of a guy going into the stands?
Interesting question. I'll just tell you, 1981 Eastern Conference Finals, Game 6. We're down like 17 in Philly. Maxwell, third quarter, Maxwell goes flying into the stands underneath the basket to get a rebound. Somebody says something to him or throws a beer on him. I can't remember. Maxwell goes flying back into the stands with both hands around the guy and falls on top of him. They get separated. Stays in the game, ignites the Celtics, and we end up winning Game 6 and then winning Game 7 by 1 point and advancing the finals and winning the title. And I was thinking,
won the MVP it was the MVP of the series that year.
Yeah, we beat the Rockets in 1981, won the whole thing. So when this happened, this was like this great moment. This was 2 years after the Bruins had gone into the stands in MSG and all the guys had gotten suspended. And then Maxwell goes in the stands, stays in the game, gets to play Game 7. I'm not even positive he got fined. And all the Celtic fans think, like, this was a seminal moment when Max went in and attacked that Sixers fan. Now it's flipped completely in 2014, and Marcus Smart is a sociopath.
Well, that was 33 years ago.
No, I know. It's just funny how things change, though. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the 81 thing and then this.
Yeah.
And now it's like you have to post our test. That there's a line between the court and the stands, and the fans don't cross it. That's what we've kind of established.
But I mean, because here, the reason I bring this up is because, okay, so the thing happens, and I don't know if I saw it live or I saw it seconds after it happened. I may have been watching a game on a different channel when it actually happened. But the initial response, of course, is like this guy who, early in the season, before the season started, was seen as almost extra mature for having come back as a sophomore kind of unnecessarily. everything seems to sort of be unraveling to a degree, and he's like a guy on the edge. But then, of course, the next reaction is like, well, what did the person say? And the immediate response by almost everyone was it must have been something racist, in which case the tide kind of shifts on the side of Smart. Then the guy comes forward and he says that he called him a piece of crap. And that doesn't seem so bad. So now it kind of goes the other way. Now it's like, Smart is really unhinged, although I think there's a lot of people who still don't believe that that's all that was said. If the fan attacks your actual personhood, your ethnicity, or if a player was gay, calling him gay, or some using some kind of homosexual slur, that would be okay, or not okay, but
I have a double answer for this one.
Okay,
I think it's interesting that you notice this in general when you go to games and stuff, that there's the code of conduct with the fans is supposedly better. Hockey's the only sport where you can still be you could just yell that somebody sucks for 3 periods and you have chants built around people sucking. And
I mean, has this improved? Like, part of the reason I hate going to live events is because I hate the way fans act at these things.
Fans were much worse. Fans were drunker and crazier. Yeah, I mean, remember, like they've changed a lot of the alcohol laws. They've changed the tailgating laws, things like that. I personally feel like at basketball games, fans are a lot more civilized than they used to be. But here's the thing that I don't get. If you, like any famous athlete, if you check their Twitter replies, it is just laden with some of the worst stuff you'll ever read, right? But yet, if you heckled any of the people with that same stuff at a game, you'd probably get kicked out. It seems like we're trying to create these 2 alternate universes, one where you're supposed to behave a certain way in public, whether that responsibility is on the fan or the player, whoever. And then another one where online it's like the Wild Wild West and you can say anything and there's no ramifications whatsoever. And that's the part that I'm confused by.
Well, that's an interesting idea, I guess. I mean, they are different worlds, though. Those are different scenarios.
Well, online's become Dungeons and Dragons, basically, where you can say whatever you want to anybody, and it's going to be okay, basically, unless you're the PR person doing that tweet about
Africa.
There's
no way to police that, though. Like,
right.
There's no way. There's no like. I don't. It's probably unconstitutional. Even if Twitter was like, we are going to police sort of abuse of people. I mean, because people see that as a media platform, they could use the First Amendment as like part of their foundation. I mean, there's the thing about this. When I saw Smart go in the stands, part of me is like, the guy must have said something more than just usual taunting.
That's how I thought too.
But then I also thought, like, a couple of weeks ago, like, he beat up a chair, and we know the chair didn't say anything.
Yep.
Like, it's like, so it is possible that he just has this hair trigger sort of that he's, and it was late in the game, a game that they really should have won. And he's making a play, I think it was with 6 seconds left, or am I confused about this? I think this was the case.
It was late. He was frustrated.
I think he was
in the heat of the moment. Yeah.
Like they were down 2 and the guy made the free throws probably afterwards, and then that was the game. So maybe it was just sort of also the weight of a loss in that situation. But
well, don't you feel like social media and just the immediacy of the internet and all that stuff, if you screw up in a game like that, it feels so much bigger now. Like, imagine if Chris Paul punched somebody in the balls like he did in that NCAA game in 2005. With the way sports is now. I don't even remember did he get suspended for that?
I don't know. I don't think so. If he did, it was so minor that neither you or I recall, That's
a much bigger deal in 2014, I feel like.
Well, and all these, like, everything is televised. I mean, it would be much different if that game had happened, just on the, 10 years ago, where maybe it was shown locally, but maybe it wasn't shown at all. And it's so visible that everyone can see it and see it over again. And then there's just becomes this idea that the Big 12 has to respond to this in some way. Like they can't just say it happened. They have to respond. And then there's the next interesting part, which is the response, even on Grantland, like I saw, it was like sort of like, well, I'm kind of in this guy's corner now. Like we kind of support this guy now. And I don't think it's an irrational reaction, but it's surprising that simply that because fact of the matter is, if the standard for athletes are that, like, I don't believe you should be able to go to a game and yell anything you want. I think those people should be thrown out immediately. I actually like the idea of that. I'd watch these games if they were played in empty gyms. I think in some ways that would be better. However, if the standard is that the player just can't go into the stands, that's a pretty low standard. Like that's not too much to expect from someone.
I agree. I actually thought the suspension was right if that was all the guy said, but I think it ties into that incident ties in with like a larger pattern of just how Marcus Smart's season is going, because he comes out of the gate. He has that incredible game against, I forget, where he had it. What did he have, like 39 points and 15 assists or something? Immediately puts himself on the map as, oh, we're talking about all these freshmen as the number one pick, but don't forget about Marcus Smart. This guy's the most complete player in the draft. He's got some family stuff going on. His brother died. I think his mom had some real health problems. So, the difference between going first, second, or third in this draft versus going 9th through 13th is a significant thing. Then he stopped playing well.
Yeah,
and if you look
he does take a lot of bad shots.
More importantly, misses a lot of bad shots. Like, he's a really poor 2-point long two shooter, and he's a poor 3-point shooter. His stock started to drop. He had the incident with the chair. The team wasn't playing like everybody thought it would, and I think that sometimes you forget these kids are like 20 and 21. Stuff piles up. They do things they regret in a split second. I mean, we all did stuff we regretted in college. I don't think it's any. I wouldn't say he deserves the reputation now for being a lifelong career hothead just because of this incident. Do you?
Well, I mean, I would. A career-long hothead? No, I mean, his career hasn't been that
I think
long.
that's what's going to happen, though, Chuck. I think people are going to think he's just, he's the hothead who shoved the fan. I think this stays with him.
If it had happened early in the year, I think almost everyone would have taken his side and assumed that the fan did something beyond the pale. Because, like I said, going into this year, just by the fact that he stayed when no one does anymore, the idea was that he was extra mature, super mature, sort of. And I think early in the year there would have been, almost unilateral support for him. But then he had these other problems, and that kind of brings him into question now. I mean, of course, they don't think he should be saddled with this reputation for forever, but, there's a limited number of things we know about a guy who played 2 years in college. We know basically how he plays, how he seems to conduct himself when he's interviewed by the media, and the 4 or 5 incidents that are sort of an extension of basketball that are very visible. So,
you left out the key point. Well, on top of the points you just laid out, he's a point guard. And the point guard is the leader of your team. He's the emotional fulcrum of your team. He's the guy that is supposed to calm everything down, be a leader, know when to shoot, when to set people up. Like, ideally, it's this job where you're the quarterback and you're the captain and all these things. You're worrying about other people's welfare, not just your own. And this is a guy in college who, as we just said, misses a lot of long 2s and 3s. And that's a recipe for disaster in the NBA. Then on top of that, if teams aren't sure about him from a personality standpoint, now that's the recipe to drop in a draft. That's what now you're talking about, somebody who maybe should be the 7th or 8th pick, and 5, 6, 7 more teams getting a little scared off for whatever reason, and now he's going 15th. So I do think it's a big deal in that respect.
Although for a guy like that is, sometimes I think if a guy drops a few slots, he goes to a different kind of team, and it can be especially a team where he doesn't have to play right away.
Perfect. Especially like in this draft where the last couple teams in the West are going to have the last couple lottery picks, and those teams are good already. I made the same argument with Johnny Manziel. I think the worst thing that can happen to Johnny Manziel is going first. If in a perfect world, he does bad at the combine for some reason, he has some sort of TMZ something, and all of a sudden he free falls and he goes to 20. I forget where Arizona's picking, but goes to 20, lands in Arizona. Now he's got that little chip on his shoulder that all these teams passed on him. He's got Larry Fitzgerald. They've got a really good defense. Like, that's a great situation. Going to Houston.
Okay, I don't think he was ever going to go first. Here's what I think happened. Did you see an interview that Wade Phillips gave to a radio station like a week ago?
I did. That was bizarre.
Okay. What Wade Phillips basically said is that when he was interviewing for the Texans job, he said, hey, I think we should take Johnny Manziel. I think he could be an Earl Campbell-like figure. I think he's like this a dynamic player, and he's from Texas. He'd be just great for everything. Well, then he didn't get the job. Well, I think what happened is conversations from that interview leaked out to guys like Mel Kiper, and they said there are meetings going on, like the Texans are talking about taking Manziel first, and that's how he suddenly jumped up from almost every board. He was like 7, 8, or 9. All of a sudden he's 1, but the conversation that moved him up to number 1 kept a guy from getting the job. Or at least helped stop the guy from getting hired. So I don't think the Texans ever viewed him as the number 1 overall pick. And now it's going to kind of work to his advantage because he'll probably go like 6, 7, 8, or 9. It will seem as though
he dropped.
That he dropped a little bit, or that he's going to make those teams pay for this. Because he just. I tend to be extremely wrong about projecting NFL players from the college. It seems to me like he's going to be a good pro.
I'm in on Johnny football. I think the model would be Favre. If you think like a cross between Breeze and Favre, but certainly has the charisma. He certainly has the arm. He's exciting. He's fearless. And to be honest, like if your big question about Johnny Manziel is his character, like look at the stuff he went through in the last year. He got through it. It'd be one thing if he didn't get through it and weird stuff happened and you were making excuses for, well, he had a rough year and once, like he got through all that stuff. He handled his business, and he's the guy who likes to have fun. Well, congratulations. That's half the NFL.
And also, a lot of times when a quarterback moves to the NFL and doesn't succeed, and we wonder why, it often is, well, he played in the right system in college. But when you look at Johnny Manziel, he is not a system quarterback. If anything, people are afraid that his game is too outside of the norm to fit into a conventional offense. But I'd rather take that. I'd rather take a guy who I know succeeded regardless of the conditions you put him in. And he's not huge. He's not a big guy, but there seems to be a lot of proof now you don't got to necessarily be a big guy. And there's no question about his arm or his accuracy. Although the fact that he had a receiver this year who seemingly was one of the better players I've ever seen at making catches in traffic, that he could kind of throw the ball toward Evans, and that guy is probably going to be the steal. I don't know where he will go. There's just a lot of good players in this draft, I think.
There's a couple of things. Like Manziel can keep plays alive, which is Russell Wilson's greatest trait. The 2 plays a game when Russell Wilson is going to get sacked on 3rd and 12 and somehow gets out of it and creates some big play. And Manziel did that in college. He's going to be able to do it in the pros. But I had Breeze and Kaepernick both on my podcast last week. And I asked both of them about my theory about how the quarterback position is 75-80% has nothing to do with talent whatsoever. And it's just smarts, charismas, work ethic, intangibles, competitiveness, being a leader, like all stuff that has nothing to do with whether you can complete a 25-yard pass or not. And Breeze said he thought it was even more than 75%. He felt like that was the position. And the athleticism stuff was ancillary. You watch Manziel and it's like that dude has whatever Brandon Whedon doesn't have, Johnny Manziel has it.
I mean, but I shouldn't say it's easy for Breeze to say this, but because that's not what I mean.
You're preaching the Breeze choir when you talk about that.
Breeze can say this because, he can also make all the throws. That seems to be one thing that does matter. That the guy needs to be able to make every possible throw. Because if they can't, defenses will start pushing teams toward making that play, forcing the guy to throw the deep out.
Right.
If they know that's the one throw he can't make. But if a guy can make all the throw, Kaepernick coming out of Nevada did not seem – I wouldn't have been surprised at all if he wouldn't have been drafted. I thought Kellen Moore was going to be better. It seemed like he was just an athletic guy with a strong arm but a strange throwing motion. But as it turns out – the arm strength is what mattered. He can throw to every spot on the field. So then all the other things, the non-conventional quarterback qualities, are only pluses. I mean, he is the best at running the read option. I think he's better than Griffin in the sense that he really reads the defensive end and doesn't mind getting hit. I mean, He's not accurate, but he's not inaccurate. He's like reasonably accurate. He'll have the 5-6 throws a game that just get wonky, but it's enough. And I'm just in on Manziel. And I also think, like, where do you stand on Clowney? Because that part's been interesting, because I actually subscribe to the board by college football argument. I think those guys see the end game, and that guy just knows, like, I'm going to go to the NFL, and I'm going to be in there for 13 years kicking everybody's ass and making a lot of money. I just don't want to get hurt this year. I really think that's a real thing. In 2012, he was one of the best defensive players I'd ever seen. I mean, it was just amazing. I remember him ran the ball on the fake punt, and it was incredible. He didn't seem that engaged this year. I feel like Spurrier almost openly accused him of not being engaged on several occasions. It does, I mean, is that though? I mean, is a lack of effort something though that signals like a real long-term problem? I think he's probably going to be great. I mean, I'm just sort of saying as being devil's advocate. I don't really believe this is it, but sometimes I do wonder about that. If a guy can't get engaged for 12 or 13 weekends in a year consistently, that seems odd to me.
It's a great, it's like the Kevin Durant case, right? Kevin Durant's a freak. We watched him in college. We knew he was going to be special in some way. We didn't know how high the ceiling was, but all he cares about is playing basketball. Like his work ethic. I went to one of their practices once, and him and Westbrook were going through the drills like it was Game 7 in the finals. And apparently that's what he's like every single day. And it does seem like, if you're looking like, what are the recurring themes for somebody being great? It always trickles back to that work ethic, right? You never hear somebody, like, very rarely is there the Lawrence Taylor who's like, yeah, that guy's a complete up and didn't show up for practice, got jerked every day. But on game day, he was unbelievable.
I think Nick Saban said this, that when he watches high school tape, okay, he is pretty much only looking at the best players in the country. Alabama is only recruiting sort of 5-star guys. Yep. And basically he watches every play that they play in high school, and he just goes after the guys who take 0 plays off. And that seems like a crazy thing to say, but the difference between taking 0 plays off and taking 1% of your plays off is huge. Because if you take 0 plays off, it probably means you're like that all the time, including practice. Like you have no ability not to do this, in which case your practices are going to be like games, and your entire roster is going to be loaded because every single guy out there does not sort of have the ability to turn off his own ignition key. I think that was, and I think that's a real sort of illustration of why they're so good. I know a couple. I was going to say, I know a couple of basketball GMs that value going to prospects and seeing them in practice over going to their games. Because they're like, you learn more from how somebody handles their business in a 2-hour practice than you do in some game, because there's so many different variables that can happen in a game. And they might be showing off because the crowd or the scouts, whatever, they're playing harder than but like in a practice when there's nobody there, that's when you kind of know who the guy is. And I thought that was interesting. I never thought about the possibility of scouting practices, but it makes sense. No, I mean, that's why I always argue with you. But when you hammer coaches, I feel like the in-game coaching is just like just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what a value of a coach is. Most of it has to do with how they run practice. So I'm not surprised that guys scouting talent are interested in that part of the guy's lives.
Well, you're talking college though, because in the pros, nobody has time to practice.
Yeah, it doesn't
and,
sound like
and
they
in-game
practice.
coaching really is 75% of it at a certain point. I mean, they like the Celtics at one point didn't practice for 3.5 weeks this season. You know, so I think like training camp obviously is huge, but once the season starts and you're on the road and you're going to all these different places, I don't think it's like college. College has the benefit of, what is it, 2 games a week?
Sometimes,
That's it, right?
Sometimes 3, but usually 2. Sometimes 1. Yeah, So.
Have you been watching a lot of college?
Yeah, I think so. I have.
Who's your favorite player that you feel like will be the most fun NBA player?
The most fun NBA player, I think, will be Wiggins.
I think I agree.
We talked about this, though. I don't know. And sometimes he does remind me a little bit of Harrison Barnes as a freshman, in that he will have a really bad game. I think one game he went 1 for 12 from the field. And it seems weird to me that somebody could be a lottery pick going 1 for 12. He had that one game you've mentioned where he had like 19 boards or something, or 18 boards. So he can kind of go up and down. This kid from Iowa, who's the kid who scored 48 and 15 the other night? Melvin something?
Well, this is the time when those guys start rising. Because I think especially the freshmen, they're running around like chickens with their head cut off for 2 months. But then in February, they start putting stuff together. And this is usually when the draft starts falling into place. I saw Embiid in person, right at the start of the season. And I knew, I knew that the upside was there and all that stuff. And Chad had compared him to Hakeem Olajuwon, which I really took personally. I just feel like there's never going to be another Hakeem Olajuwon. So Chad threw that out, like, possibility if everything goes right, this guy could be another Hakeem Olajuwon. I'm thinking, are you on drugs? Like, that's never happening. And then, so I was predisposed to not wanting him to be good. And then I saw him in person, and I think he's 7'1". He's built like Ibaka, just skinny, athletic. When he runs, he just looks perfect. Like, it looks like just God created him to run in a basketball court. And long arms, and he clearly didn't really know what he was doing, but he was just so ridiculous athletically, it didn't matter.
I mean, that's the thing. He has played so little. I think that, comparing him to Olajuwon, like, only sets up the chance for failure. But I think that he's probably similar in the sense he's one of these guys who played soccer growing up.
That's it.
And his footwork and his coordination is pretty good. And
it's great. It's not pretty good. It's great.
He has improved in the time from the first time I saw him this year to now. The guy I was trying to remember is Melvin Ejim. I just looked up, or Ejim from Iowa State. I'd only watched him a couple times, and he didn't do that much. And then, he had this 48 and 18, I guess, over TCU. I'm saying, but there again, I didn't see the game. I just sort of saw the line. So I'm kind of interested in seeing a little bit more of him.
The Chad's Hakeem thing. It feels like sacrilege to me, but I do think it's legitimate to at least bring it up, because he's only played for a couple years. He played a different sport. But really, like, anybody who plays soccer as a kid growing up and then switches to basketball, it seems like it's one of the greatest things you could do. And then on top of it, he's getting better as the year goes along. There's nobody like him. He's got a little bit of a nasty side. I think you got to take him first right now, but I'm still leaving the door open for Wiggins or Parker to go nuts over this next 6 weeks. I think either of those guys could step it up a level. There's a lot of pressure.
Also, I don't totally disbelieve the kid when he says he might stay 2 years. I mean, he's coming from a totally different mindset than every other. Is he from Cameroon? Is that where he's from?
Yeah, from November on, there was buzz he was staying 2 years.
Well, no, there's buzz because he said, like, I think I'm going to stay 2 years. And that wouldn't be, because like the jump that Olajuwon made from his freshman year to his sophomore year was profound. And then he got, I think he averaged like 6 points a game or something a lot when he was a freshman, and then was immediately a dominant player the next year. It would help him. I honestly think that, I don't think Wiggins will stay, but I think it would help him if he did.
I guess the difference with Olajuwon, and I always forget to mention Olajuwon when I talk about like the greatest athletes I've ever seen in person on a basketball court. It's really like, it's LeBron and it's Jordan. And I never saw Wilt. But Hakeem should be on there. Like, young Hakeem was like nothing anybody had ever seen. It was just out of control. This is this 6'10" guy who moved like a ballet dancer. And Embiid, I don't think his footwork is that great. But, man, there's just not a lot of people like him in the National Basketball Association.
This is like a weird comparison because but when you watch Embiid play, like just the way he runs and he moves his arms, doesn't he almost look like footage from a guy from the 60s? Like he looks like Bill Russell, kind of the way he, like just the running form he has does not seem like it reflects the way guys run now. Like I'm not sure if the way people run has changed this much over the last 40 years or whatever. But
that was the big Odin mistake. Odin put on too much weight, and he had a lot of stuff going against him structurally anyway. But the biggest mistake he made was just bulking up, and he was carrying so much weight on a frame that wasn't really built for basketball anyway, and it just kind of fell apart. I saw him in person on Wednesday, and he's moving a lot better than he did. He's a lot lighter than he was, which I think helps him. But you see, like, if you see Serge Ibaka in person, it's just like that guy's never breaking down unless there's some sort of freak injury where, he falls in traffic or somebody falls in his leg. That guy's not getting hurt. Like, he's just athletically perfect for a basketball court. And I think Embiid's like that too. It's so tough to find. I remember seeing Hasheem Thabeet as a rookie, I think on the Grizzlies, and just being like, oh my God, like this guy can't run. There's just no chance. He didn't seem that way in college, though. I mean, I'm sure somebody. I don't know what changed.
And they'll be like, "Oh, yes, he did," but like, I didn't feel like he was that. He just immediately he went to go to the D League and all this stuff. He couldn't compete immediately. I guess I had something. Like Ibaka's. I'm surprised how Ibaka has become kind of a perimeter offensive player. Was that expected? Was that always the hope?
That was every year, the last 3 years, he got better and better at 2-point shots. He's probably the most reliable big guy shooting an 18-footer in the entire league. Maybe Bosh. It's either him or Bosh. But
Bosh is probably the best. But like it seems like Ibaka is usually facing the basket. He doesn't play with his back to the basket very much.
The guy that is really tough for me to figure out is Jabari, because I love seeing these guys in person because it's just a different experience for. Your instantaneous reaction, I do feel like it matters. And with Jabari, he was just so comfortable and so good and so fun to play with and moved so well and could just do everything. It was kind of enchanting to watch him in person. The second half of that game, Wiggins just shut him down. And Parker's been up and down this whole season. They're like playing him at center. Coach K's benched him a couple times. But yet, I still feel like he could go nuts in the tournament. I don't know why. There's something about him. He's very, very Carmelo-ish to me. I don't know if you're seeing that.
Yeah, he has. I guess he's scored quite a bit. I don't think of him as like a Carmelo-like scorer, but I think he's like he broke the record for points by a freshman for Duke. I think already.
Right.
So I guess he is scoring. I actually have seen Duke less this year than other years. They used to seem like they were on all the time, but now that so many games are on, I guess it doesn't feel that way, and I miss them more.
I think every game's on.
I saw the Syracuse game. That was fun. Syracuse's point guard is good.
He's really good. I like him.
Yeah,
I like Syracuse in general. The Syracuse, Arizona, Michigan State. Those three all look good, but I still watch that Kansas team. It does seem like they have the highest ceiling. We'll see if they've actually put it together. But
I mean, I think that in a weird way, people are still underrating Wichita State. They went to the Final Four last year. They got a lot of people back. And they haven't gotten beat by anyone. And it still doesn't – I mean, they're going to be a 1 seed. So, until the regional final, they're not going to be playing anybody who's a top 15 team. I mean, I think that they have a real shot to go back to the Final Four. And if they do, it seems like a team that was their year the year prior has a real chance to do damage.
Well, you know where you're watching day one of March Madness?
Where?
In Los Angeles, California. You're going to be part of Grantland Live. I forgot to tell you. You're coming out.
I don't think that's going to happen.
No, it is. It is. I'm going to talk you into it. It's definitely going to happen. You're coming out. It's going to be great. Your kid will be almost 3 months old at that point.
Yeah, I know, but it's complicated.
By the way, we have to go, but quickly give us your 90-second thoughts on fatherhood.
Well, it's been a good experience so far. I feel like my constant fear that my baby is going to die and it's going to be my fault keeps my mind sharp. And then the amount of care required sort of gives my life purpose. So it's kind of like a Life of Pi situation where my baby is the tiger.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I figured you'd have a good take. By the way, that fear never goes away.
Yeah, well, it's got to be
at any point. It just compounds itself.
It's got to erode slightly, though. I mean, right away, those first 4 days or 3 days, man, it's like your baby makes noise and you want the baby to be quiet. And then the moment they become quiet, you think to yourself, well, it must be dead. And then you go over and check it. So it's like you can't really win. I'll say this, though, when you have, say, something wrong with your knee or like you have like a mole or something, you should never look at the internet, right? Because the internet will immediately make you think if you're going to die of cancer.
Yeah, you have knee cancer.
However, with a baby, it's actually great. No matter what you think is wrong with your baby, when you start typing it into Google, it automatically gets filled in. Like, my baby smells like a loaf of bread, and like a million other people have had this happen. It's very reassuring. You cannot find a problem with a baby that other people have not had. The only one I could find is I just started trying it. I put in like, my baby is not a baby. And like, I don't think anything came up for that. Otherwise, it does seem like every issue a child can have has now been documented on the internet.
Well, if you think you're scared now, just wait until the 18-month mark. When they can move and they can do stuff and pull things out of the wall and pull bookcases onto themselves and get out of your apartment, and that's when you'll know the true meaning of fear. Yeah, 18 months.
They keep changing the worst part. Like before you have the baby, they say like it's just that first month that's terrible. And then the baby's a month old, and now people are like, well, actually it's 4 months. 4 months is crazy. And then some people are like, no,
those people are nuts. Yeah. It's, first of all, for the dad, it's smooth sailing until the kid can get into trouble. Because really, it's a mom baby thing for the first 6-7 months. We're hired help. Mm. We're waiters and busboys basically. But then once that kid can start moving around a little bit and recognize you and all that stuff, that's when the dads become important. Because we become the second cornerback in the secondary. Second shutdown corner. But yeah, in my personal opinion, I think 18 months is the worst. If you see any parent who has an 18-month-old kid, the constant fear in their eyes, if they're at somebody's house with their kid, there's just nothing like it. You just never know. They'd just be gone. They'd be down the block in 5 seconds.
I know that does sound terrifying.
It's great. I'm glad. I like the idea of you as a parent. I'm excited. I feel like there's going to be a couple really fun pieces out of this from you at some point in your life.
No, I don't think I'm going to do that, though. I don't think I'm going to write about it because, I didn't like reading those pieces when I didn't have a kid, and I don't like the idea of someone having an experience that happens to them, and it's like, oh, now this is what's important. So I'm very wary about doing that.
Well, you're just very wary in general.
I am.
I'm a very wary 40-year-old man. We're going to wrap this up because we went past an hour, and now I have to do stuff. Chuck Klosterman, as always, a pleasure. A lot of stuff going on. We will talk to you before March Madness. I look forward to seeing you in L.A. on Thursday of the first day of March Madness. It's going to be great.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Target % off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.